world around us these days is both digital and global. Technology is suffusing everything. We're globally interconnected with people and places that we've never been connected before. In this digital global age that we now live, we're finding that for the most part our schools are neither of those. Schools are supposedly knowledge institutions where we teach kids to be masters of information. And yet if you look out in the real world beyond schools and beyond universities as how knowledge workers do their jobs, they're doing it all with computers. And here we are, we're pretending that we're preparing students for knowledge work in a knowledge economy, a very hyper-connected, hyper-competitive global knowledge economy. And yet we're doing it with ring binders and notebook paper. When we look at what does it mean to be a learner these days, it's also very different. And I'm not sure that we're really empowering students these days to take full advantage of the wide variety of learning opportunities, digital technologies, the internet, and so on, in ways that make them powerful learners, not just now, but in the years to come. So much of our education paradigm for the last 100 years has been focused on factual recall, low-level procedural knowledge, the kind of stuff that you can easily and cheaply assess with bubble tests. And what we're finding is that that kind of knowledge is ubiquitous these days. Instead of suffering from knowledge scarcity, we're suffering from information overload. And any fact that's in any textbook or on any worksheet or any end-of-chapter practice question or whatever, you can easily find on the web in 100 different forms. We have to skill ourselves up to a higher level of knowledge work. That lower level work in which students spend about 80 to 85% of their day-to-day classroom time on doesn't really have any kind of economic value anymore. We still need to know facts, we still need to know stuff. There are, when we go and find information out on the internet, we still need to be able to think critically about it and what does it mean. But nobody's regurgitating facts anymore in these days and getting paid for it. Instead, what they're being asked to do is what can you do with that knowledge, how do you think about that knowledge, how do you create new value with that knowledge, and so on. That's all upper level mental work. That's applying, that's synthesizing, that's analyzing, that's creating, that's doing. So I think if you're walking into a high functioning school these days, kids are doing, they're thinking, they're creating, they're making, they're interacting, they're collaborating, they're communicating, they're being critical thinkers, they're being problem solvers. They're more self-directed in terms of their learning, so they can be deep and passionate about something and really express that in ways that are relevant and authentic. We have them working on real-world projects, not artificial word problems from the textbook, and so on. So I think that's what a really high-functioning school looks like. It's one that gives kids greater autonomy, greater choice, greater self-direction, and they're empowering kids to do that work, which in most cases means that they're using computers, they're using the internet, they're using video, they're using collaboration tools, they're using whatever is necessary to get the job done. Everything is becoming technology suffused. So you're hard pressed these days to find a job out there that pays well, where you do any kind of thinking whatsoever that isn't heavily technology infused. So how do we start getting kids access to laptop computers, iPads, netbooks, digital camcorders, whatever they need to do that kind of higher level academic work, learning work, mental work, like it's done out in the field. When we make those tools, those hardware systems, those software systems, those online systems available to students, we find that they're much more capable of doing things than we thought they were before. We have school districts right now where we have 7th graders that are using the same kind of virtual reality design software as aerospace engineers at Rockwell Collins. We have students who are creating robust online conversation spaces. They're doing professional level video editing. They're learning to express themselves and communicate and create knowledge products that we used to say you'd have to be 25, 30, and have years of experience in your job in order to be able to do, and now they're doing those in middle school and high school. So what we're finding is that when we can get tools in the hands of our students, they amaze us on a regular basis with the level of work that they can do. We're seeing another movement occurring out there, which is that students are increasingly learning from machines and software, not from a live human being. So that may be a virtual teacher somewhere else, but it's increasingly software, or it's a simulation, or it's a video game. or it's some kind of self-paced internet experience, and so on. And then, of course, the software, once it pushes that information out, can then also assess your learning and mastery of those lower level mental outcomes in a variety of ways. Just like we're using worksheets for multiple choice questions, for fill in the blanks, for crossword puzzles, for short essays, and so on, the software is increasingly able to do all that kind of work, which means that we have to start thinking as educators, what's our value added above and beyond what the software can do these days. I think in the future we're going to see that learning software can not only handle the lower level mental work, but increasingly through simulations and video game-like environments. The artificial intelligence agencies can also tell us not just what you know, but what can you do with what you know? How do you apply what you know? One thing we have to recognize is that online learning is exploding. Online learning still has a fairly minor role here in Iowa. We have a few online learning opportunities available to students, but nowhere near what our capacity needs. These new communication tools are enabling all kinds of new capabilities. We're starting to wrap our head around the idea that a teenager can have a global audience in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions even, right? It's not uncommon now to go to YouTube and see some video that some adolescent made that's, racking up 5, 10, 12 million views. We're seeing writing spaces like fanfiction.net, where kids are doing interest-based fiction writing around book communities, books or movies or TV shows that they love, and they're writing stories set in those settings, in those universes with those characters, and they're writing tens of thousands of words simply because they love those characters and those literary or media universes so much, and they're actively soliciting feedback, right? They want to be better writers. So what the internet does, it enables us to have a voice, right? So many of us are able to have a voice that we were never ever able to have before. It also allows us to find each other's voices and then to work together in ways that we weren't able to. And that enables a lot of really interesting collaboration opportunities and learning opportunities. We haven't gotten past the geographic mindset yet that geography matters. And unless your job is location dependent, geography matters not a whit. What we're finding is that you're not, as has been said, you're no longer competing with people just in your county or your state, but you're competing with people all over the country and all over the world for whatever you're doing. So whatever you're selling or whatever you're offering or whatever kind of charity you're trying to raise money for or whatever service you're providing or whatever idea you're trying to raise mind share around, there are hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of other people all around the world who are also doing that. So this new globalized interconnected economy has huge implications for the economic side of things in terms of workforce preparation and the kind of skills that we need to maintain as individuals and as workers and employees throughout our entire lives. Where we're still slower to change is, what does day-to-day instruction look like? What does day-to-day learning look like? And I think we're still very much stuck in older ways of thinking and doing and being. We seem to want to just add on to what we're currently doing. We never take anything off our plate. And there's lots of creative ways to stop doing things that we're currently doing and do other things that are more important or that better move us in the directions that we need to go. One of the common refrains we hear from many communities, board members, superintendents, parents, etc., is that, budget times are already tough, they're already tight, how do we handle this? And I guess I would say two things to those folks. The first one is recognize that there are other school systems that look a lot like yours, right? They're operating in the same policy environment, the same regulatory environment, the same funding environment that you are. They're about the same size as you, they're similar kinds of communities, and yet they're making this happen. Go find some of those other places that look like you, roughly, right? And then talk about how did they make this shift? How did they repurpose personnel and funding streams and so on to get where they need to go? The biggest thing they're doing is they're facilitating instructional change. The tenor and tone of the classroom looks different. If 85% of kids' day-to-day classroom work now is lower level factual recall and procedural knowledge, how do we start shifting that up towards the upper end of Bloom's taxonomy, for example, so that they're doing higher level work? And that's really where the leadership needs to come in, where we say, look, we're going to walk away from some things that maybe we've held dear in the past. The world is changing around us. We have to change too. And that means that learning looks different. That means that teaching looks different. That means that curriculum looks different. That means that resourcing looks different. That means that staffing looks different. I think everybody is recognizing that we're in a transition period. It's very tumultuous. It's very turbulent. And to take teachers who sometimes have been teaching for several decades, right, and have been told that this is the way you should be an instructor, and now all of a sudden, well, you got to do all this new stuff instead. You've got to move from lower level cognitive work to higher level cognitive work. You've got to figure out how to pull these learning technologies into that in a way that's powerful. The technology is a tool and a means to an end, but the end is ultimately higher level learning experiences for kids. What does the world look like now? What will the world look like, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? How do we start preparing kids for that? There's lots of really neat stuff that's out there and available to us. We just have to, decide we're going to do it and get rolling.